Tonight, we are following new developments about the 4 University of Idaho students who were found dead in their home. Bryan Kohberger, accused of killing Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonsalves in November. Well, sources now telling News Nation an ID belonging to one of them was found in Kohberger's car. And meanwhile, authorities in Pennsylvania are looking into Kohberger's possible involvement in other killings. Here to help me unpack the latest developments is former CIA officer and FBI special agent Tracy Walder. Tracy, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Natasha.
And if Kohberger is guilty of this crime that he's accused of and went through so many steps to avoid being caught, like wearing gloves while going out, etc., why would he keep an ID of one of the victims that could so easily be tied back to him?
Sure. Well, obviously, his involvement in these crimes is alleged at this point. And, if he kept sort of a souvenir, really, it points to just that, that he, for his ego purposes, wanted to keep a souvenir of this crime, wanted to keep a souvenir of what he believed that he had successfully done. And I always think a lot of times with criminals that I've seen, it's always their ego that gets them in the end. I do think that he was very confident in what he had done. And I believe that he felt he hadn't left any evidence behind, but it's always their ego that's their undoing. And I believed he wanted a trophy, if you will, of the crime that he had committed.
How would his defense defend him having a victim's ID in his possession? What would the explanation for that be?
So that's going to be the tough one in this case. I think one of the things I've always felt about the knife sheath, although it's frustrating, one thing a defense attorney could say is that it was a party house. There were people that came in and out. People probably had knives on them at some point. It's Idaho. And so that was one way they could have explained it. But it's going to be very difficult for a defense attorney to explain how potentially a victim's ID ended up in his vehicle where victims were not known to have been. I think that's going to be the part where they're going to really have a hard time here. And that's why I believe this could be potentially more damaging to him than the discovery of the knife sheath.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Let's talk about this because the ID has been called a smoking ID in headlines. Do you think that this is the most significant piece of evidence yet and that prosecutors will be able to use this?
I do. I've always felt, and I think I said on this show that I have felt that the car was really kind of the keys to the kingdom, if you will, in this case. He was definitely going to leave something, whether it was himself or part of the victims, behind in the car. And if this is indeed the case, then he left the ID of one of the victims. And again, this is all alleged, but if so, it could really tell us who his target was allegedly in the committing of this crime. And so, I think that this really could be a smoking gun piece of evidence for him.
I appreciate that. And Jennifer Coffendorfer spoke with News Nation's Chris Cuomo just this week on how Pennsylvania authorities are looking into Kohberger's possible connection with other crimes. Let's listen to that quickly together.
I think it is a signature type crime. I mean, this is a vicious crime with a K-bar knife. It's unusual. It was a co-ed on campus. So if they're looking at something very specific that's unsolved with these parameters, they're probably looking in the right direction.
Do you agree with Jennifer here that this is a signature type crime and may be connected to other cold cases? Or does your instinct say that Kohberger, this was likely a one-off for him?
I'm not sure. And I know that that's not very helpful in this case. But one of the things that investigators do have at their disposal now, which is going to be very helpful to them, is something called VICAP, which is the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. And that is a database where you can run things like MOs, weapons used, gender of the person committing the crime through that and sort of build a pattern. And what they can do is then go out from there and look at other crimes that were committed in Pennsylvania. I think the bigger issue here and the bigger thing in regards to his signature is potentially that trophy that we just talked about, allegedly that ID that was left over. I think that's going to be key to see if he had others on him and that those could be connected to other crimes. I think that's a bigger signature than using a K-bar knife.
I appreciate that insight. If Kohberger is convicted, how likely is it, do you think, that he will receive the death penalty?
That's actually a great question. And my own criminal justice students have actually asked me that multiple times. I think it's highly likely if he is convicted in this case. I mean, we know that Idaho just passed the use of the firing squad in their state if the lethal injection drug is not available. I do believe that he is looking at the death penalty in this case. if he is convicted, this is a quadruple homicide that was clearly premeditated, and it would be a justified use of the death penalty.
All right, Tracy Walder, always appreciate the context and time. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.